Yes, we'll be live soon. And JJ, is everyone already logged in? How do I know when folks are logged in?
We are live and ready to go right now.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending the reverse transfer presentation here at the Performance Partnership. I hope everyone's been attending some good sessions so far, and I hope that we do the same for you guys here. I hope we've got a lot of good information to be able to share with you, and hope that you guys get some things to take away with it. So first of all, move this over here. Whoop. There it is. All right, so just a quick introduction on myself and Mr. Whitaker. My name is Patrick Holyfield. I am the Dean of Enrollment Management at Stanley Community College. I'm also the co-chair for North Carolina Reverse Transfer Advisory Committee. What that means is that essentially of the committee we have two parts of it, or three parts, I guess you could say. Three parts. One part is representatives from North Carolina community colleges. Then we also have representatives from the UNC institutions, and then we have representatives from our system offices. And so we come together to make sure that reverse transfer is up and going. And, you know, luckily for myself, I get to be the co-chair that represents community colleges. Also on here today, we have Ms. Gwendolyn Whitaker. If you want to give a quick introduction for yourself.
Whitaker here. When they call me Gwendolyn, I'm looking around for my mom because that means I'm in trouble. Whitaker, registrar here for Site Technical Community College. I also have the honor of serving as a member on the North Carolina Reverse Transfer Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Brent. And we have a couple more folks. We have Dr. Monty Hickman on here as well, and you'll see his contact information at the end. He also serves as one of our system office representatives to you know, make sure we're keeping things between the ditches. So if you have any questions or anything, feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll be able to get a hold of those once we get close to the end of the session. I don't envision this taking the entire time, so hopefully we can leave some time for some discussion. Hopefully you guys can share some information of what you think of reverse transfer. Because we're, as a committee, that's one of the things that we look for is feedback about the process so that we can learn how to better this process for you guys. So without any further ado, we'll get started here. So the first thing I wanted to cover was reverse transfer and walk you guys down that little dirt path of the past. And so if you're new to the system or new to reverse transfer, this was a collaborative effort that began back in 2013. Some of my notes actually says 2012, but the Credit When It's Due grant began in 2013, where it chose colleges and universities across the country to identify processes in which we can implement reverse transfer, to be able to award credit for students that have earned a credential, but for whatever reason they earned it while not at your institution. They've actually moved on to a four-year institution. They've accumulated enough credits to actually receive that associate degree. In 2013, it was piloted by 15 community colleges and 8 universities. They were able to actually go through the process, try to figure out the holes, the process itself, how to create a manual for the process, And then also to make it as easy as possible, especially for our community colleges. As many of you know, those folks who have been doing reverse transfer for a while, it's a rather beastly task. So sometimes it, to not our avail, but winds up being something that, it's a lot of work for a little return. Hopefully some of the things that we're moving forward into the future, hopefully those things will actually make it a better opportunity for our institutions, for our students, most of all, and then also hopefully raise up some of the credentials that we're able to get. So through that process, they created an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, which then basically worked as our policy moving forward with reverse transfer. It's one of those things where it's the known facts of the way that we operate and the way that we do business. So one of the things coming out of that is that community colleges keep their residency as far as how many credits a student must have in order to receive a credential from that institution. It also stood as an arguing point to say, community colleges aren't there to recruit new students. It's not an enrollment tool, an enrollment incentive for our university students because they've already transferred on. We're just there to give a credential to hopefully assist that student and boost them, give them that needed assistance towards their bachelor's degree. And then, if life gets in the way while they're at their four-year institution, they have a credential that they can then use to seek employment. So it's one of those things where through the discussions, we wanted to make sure that, everyone wants to stay off my lawn. So you want to make sure that you're not doing something to recruit those university students since they've already moved on and they're seeking their bachelor's degree. That transfer credit, once it's awarded, then part of the MOU is then to award our transfer advantage. What that transfer advantage does for the student, basically it allows them to continue forward in their bachelor's degree, no longer having to complete those general education requirements. Now, being one community college out of 58, that everyone does everything differently. There's 58 ways to do everything. And so as you can imagine, there's 16 ways to interpret our transfer advantage. So that's one of those things that, moving into the future, it could be a good discussion to make sure that all of our students are receiving some consistent bonuses as they move forward towards their degree. Some of the universities haven't clearly laid out what that process is for their transfer advantage, and while others may not. So what does that process look for the student? We'll just briefly go over this piece. Basically, whenever the student applies to the college, starts attending that college, the first time that they log into their student information system, there's an opt-in point. And so what that does is it kind of blocks them from moving forward in their process for registration, for finding out more information about financial aid and the classes that they're in, their schedule. They have to say yes or no to opting into reverse transfer. Once they say yes, that information is then stored in the UNC Data Mart. And as they're moving along through their academic process, each semester they're running their reports to submit those transcripts into the data mart, and they hit the earned hours mark. So right now what we're using is 60 credit hours to 100 credit hours. So once they hit 60, then that releases those transcripts into the availability of the community colleges to start reviewing to see whether or not this person's earned a credential. Then let's say it gets up to 100 credit hours. So after a few semesters, the student has accumulated enough credits. Once it hits 100, it's assumed that that student is now getting close to earning their bachelor's degree, and the hope is that, they're about to graduate from their four-year school, so the advantage for them would be to continue on that extra additional semester or two, and they go ahead and get that credential. So once we pull in that data, the UNC Data Mart unlocks those transcripts, we're able to look at the data, we review it, we award a degree for that student, and it allows them to earn that transfer advantage. So what are the things that we've learned coming out of our best practices for reverse transfer as we work through this process? One of the things I always stress to our institutions is that always review your local course substitution process. You want to make sure that your process is strong when it comes to a student needs this course to meet this requirement. that course may not be something that your institution offers. It could also be something that typically wouldn't be used as that requirement for that credential. But if we look at it closer, what is the benefit for the student? We need to make sure that we're doing everything to try to benefit our students to get them as close to that bachelor's degree as possible. And this hurdle for them, this associate degree, will give them that associate degree advantage. And in doing so, when we award that credit, that student's never going to come back to us to say, you know what, I was English 114 short of getting my associate degree, but I had this literature course, or I had, English in America course. Why couldn't that have been used to get that credit? So, they're not going to come back. They've already got their credits towards their degree at their bachelor's institution. So why not give them that course substitution? So that's where that communication locally, you want to make sure that you have a strong communication piece between our student services side, our registrar's office, our instructional side, our faculty, our approval units, to make sure that we're explaining to folks that this is in the best interest of the student to receive credit for this course, so that they can earn their associate degree. That's where your waivers come in. So one of the things early on in our process for reverse transfer is, it's the need for the ACA course. And so before a few years ago, the ACA was kind of slowly growing, and it became something that institutions were using. Some were using integrated courses that were encompassing the information from the program. Others were using transfer courses or transfer success. And then for AA and AS, then it became the transfer success. And then it became mandatory that every student had the ACA course. So this student, guess what, has already transferred, so successfully. And so the system office folks had seen that wording out there, and through our conversations with the RTAC, we had then created this waiver for ACA courses. So for those associate degrees, for the associate in arts and associate in science, for the purposes of reverse transfer, we're able to waive our ACA courses. Another thing that I want to point out as far as our best practices coming out of reverse transfer is maintaining our local transfer equivalencies. Our local transfer equivalencies is how we build our network of colleges and our network of courses that are able to apply towards those general education requirements, or your technical requirements. The Data Mart has a lot of good courses in there, and it lays out, here's 3 different options for those courses, or what these courses are. The one English course compared to all the other 16 institutions. So you can see what those institutions are calling their English 111. You'll be able to see what that looks like per institution. And I'll show you an example of that in a second. Another piece of it that one of the good things that came out of this is starting to utilize our reporting that we're doing as far as tracking reverse transfer. If you've been doing reverse transfer for a while, you'll remember we had that handy dandy Excel spreadsheet that we used to send to our good friend, Dr. Hickman. We would go through the process, and he would send the email asking, guys, please just send me the spreadsheet so that I can see who graduated. And then that spreadsheet would then be shared with our UNC Data Mart, and then they would remove those graduates. Timing was off with that. We weren't able to.
Y'all drove me crazy.
So we tried to figure out a way. How do we keep money from going nuts? How do we keep him from going crazy? And so we have this graduate process, or this graduate reporting tool that we use monthly to let system office know, here's our graduates that were graduated over the course of this month. And so we then started using that process to report our reverse transfer graduates. Now, is that perfect? Not at all, but it's closer. We're getting more and more closer to the actual timeline we need for reporting reverse transfer graduates before that Data Mart process opens up. One of the things, again, if you've been doing this for a while, you've noticed that you may have graduated a student last semester, but they're still showing up on your Data Mart report. That's that timing thing that we're trying to work out. Unfortunately, the past couple times, it's not worked well. So there you have it. Don't blame Patrick. It wasn't my fault. But I shared that information back with our UNC Data Mart folks, and guess what? They're trying to straighten that piece out just so that we can get it cleaned up. Hopefully, by the time that you do it the next time, it'll be shipshape. So back to our, those transfer equivalencies. This is what it would wind up looking like. You could check it against any other community college. I always like to start with Stanley Community College just to see what we call the course, and then you can see what it says across the actual UNC system. This way, this is where you can start making sure that what you're transferring in is that same number that you're using across the system. This is also a good way to update your information, like you see on there for the UNC Charlotte. I know UNC Charlotte actually has a different number for their English courses than the rest of them. I'm not sure if this screenshot was taken before or after that, but that was one of the things where we had to update the UNC data mart just to make sure that everyone was in the know as far as what are these courses and what are the numbers that they're using. But that's one of the good things that comes out of this is that we have representation on the Reverse Transfer Advisory Committee from UNC Charlotte. And, if there's a question, we just ask that person to go into their system, pull it up, and on the fly we can learn, here's what it is, and this is how we can use it. So up to 2016, this was 2013 through 2016, we were trying to figure out, how has this been benefiting our students? How many credentials have we awarded in that window, in that short time frame, from the time that we started this process to 2016? And as you can see, by 2016, we've awarded almost 1,500 associate in arts degrees, a little over 60 associate applied sciences. Now, you might ask, what do you mean we're awarding associate applied science? Sometimes, it's not the recommendation that you go above and beyond, but if you're Gwen, you always go above and beyond. So sometimes you try to find an extra credential for that student so they can use it towards employment. Now, do you have to do that? No, but it's really nice that you did. Now, you also have some folks that are offering that associate in fine arts. 5 of those students, 5 of those credentials were had, along with almost 170 associate in science credentials were awarded up to 2016 through the reverse transfer process. That's a little shy of 1,700 students who were then eligible for that transfer advantage, meaning that they wouldn't have to go back and take that additional English, that additional humanities, that additional science course to continue on their studies. They could then, from that point forward, all they needed to do was just their program work. Just their accounting major, just their business major, just their psychology work. So let's step into the present. So right now we've been talking about 2013 to 2016, some of the things that we've been learning and trying to figure out with reverse transfer. In 2017 is when the Reverse Transfer Advisory Committee came together. There was an opportunity for us to basically use this governing committee to make sure that this process stays up to date, make sure that the manuals are still good, make sure that if there's feedback to be had, then we're able to listen to the folks at the community colleges and from the universities. And the person who had built this system, this reverse transfer system, and the idea of reverse transfer, the individual who built it actually went on to the clearinghouse to try to make this a national process. So took that expertise from North Carolina, now let's apply it on a national level. And like I said before, we have representatives from both the community colleges and the UNC system and the actual system offices. And we're continuing this process, maintaining it and growing it, the work of reverse transfer in North Carolina. Now, moving forward, once we're going into the future, you'll start seeing how are we trying to grow this process? How are we trying to make this something that's very beneficial for our students? But before we go there, I just want to also continue with the other things that we do with our Reverse Transfer Advisory Committee, such as, such as continuous training, feedback. We try to offer training sessions at least once a semester. Now, you might say, Patrick, where was my training this past semester? Well, you know what? There's some things that happen because of COVID. And what we thought we wanted to do at that point for for our colleges was to offer office hours for those new folks coming on board. And so what we did was we offered training sessions for the new registrars or the new reverse transfer folks who were just coming in. You know, during that time, it's got to be tough to start a new job from the computer, where, you know, you can't walk over to someone's office and talk to them for a minute to try to understand something. You're having to learn everything from a manual. Sometimes all you had was your laptop at home. So then you're trying to read your manual and then go into the system and then go here and go there. So we wanted to offer it just for those folks because we also figured that, you know what, a lot of people are doing a lot of Zoom meetings and you might be Zoomed out by now. So we offered all these trainings online for just our new folks. Through those training sessions, it gives us an opportunity to receive feedback. You know, in the process, you know, sometimes there's courses that are in the crosswalk from the UNC Dashboard that are questionable at best. And so we use that as a time to think about the process, think about the data that's in the system, you know, how can we fix that? How can we fix our timing? And then we kind of go over some strategies. You know, what are some of the strategies we can learn from reverse transfer? How do we apply some of the things that we know from reverse transfer to our everyday work? And you'll see some of that coming out in the future here in a second. Part of this also is policy development. Again, you know, we're trying to keep our manual up to date. We did recently just updated it to a 2020 version. I know we've had our 2016 or 2013 version for a while, and we've been holding on to it tight. But we've changed a few things in it just to keep it up to date, to make sure that everyone knows that the cutoff windows are 60 to 100 now. And that, you know, some institutions changed their logo who are participants in the program, so we updated that information. You know, we really went through the manual and tried to figure out, make sure that everything's up to date. And then through our conversations, it begins talking about future opportunities, things that are on the horizon, things that we can start looking at to figure out how do we benefit as many students as possible through reverse transfer. Because, like I said, it's a pretty heavy task to run all those transcripts, to review all those credentials, to only come up with just a handful of lucky students who actually graduate from it. So here's our numbers from 2013 to present. So we're taking that little under 1,700 credentials to today. And as we're looking at it today, you can see that we've got over 4,200 associate in arts, 325. Wynn is still pumping those AASs out of here. So we've got 325 associate in applied sciences. We've got 25 associate in fine arts, and then over 800 associate in science credential earners. And it's one of those things where you look at it and you're like, wow, we've got over 5,500 credentials that are earned. Over 5,500 students in North Carolina have earned the opportunity based out of the transfer advantage. So those students don't have to go back and take those general education requirements. And so this also gives them, again, the opportunity to, let's say, you know, life happens, they can no longer continue at their four-year institution. Guess what? They now have that associate degree that they didn't have from your institution before they left. So hands down, this is an excellent opportunity for our students to be able to help accelerate them towards their career goals or towards whatever they're wanting to do at the four-year institution. So with that, let's start moving a little forward into what we're working on in the present, which is our partnership with the National Student Clearinghouse. Now, you might say, Patrick, you told us about the clearinghouse a while back, and then we haven't heard anything else. Well, so that transition is something that takes time because each individual community college signs up for it. Because guess what? We all have individual clearinghouse contracts. So each community college signs up for it. The way this works is it's a two-way street. Each community college signs up for it, each university signs up for it, and if they both have students who are attending both or have attended one and moved on to the other, at that time we're able to share that transcript through the clearinghouse. Now, what does that process look like, you might ask? Very similar to our current North Carolina process using the UNC Dashboard. So you've got your four institutions, they're reporting transcripts into the clearinghouse, we're reporting transcripts into the clearinghouse. And then it gives us the opportunity to see those transcripts and award those degrees. And so you're thinking, but we already have this process through the UNC Dashboard. Why do we need to do this through the clearinghouse? I'm glad you asked that, folks. This is the reason why. So every one of us have an independent or private college or university near us, who are, our students wind up transferring to. So out of our 58 community colleges, you've got 36 opportunities for a student to attend a private institution. They accept our credentials, they accept our courses into the clearinghouse, from their transcript, they get to report it into their system. They're using that towards their degree. And so we're able to actually reverse transfer that credit back by using the clearinghouse. Also, another piece of this, many of us have students who transfer out of state. When they're transferring out of state, we can use the clearinghouse also to be that in-between piece, similar to the data mart, but we're actually sending it to FIU. So that students from Florida International that are attending from our community college can receive this credential. Now, it's a little different because the transfer advantage doesn't exist when we're working with our independents and our out-of-state institutions. But it's your advantage for the student to earn that credential so that, again, if things happen and they're no longer able to continue, they have that associate degree. Also, this associate degree is that bolstering piece that hopefully speeds them up into their bachelor's degree. This is that one piece, that credential that gives them the oomph they need to continue on it and to move forward. So taking what was known from our UNC Data Mart process and mixing it into the clearinghouse, this is an example of what that information would pull, that data would pull out. Now it's a little different because it's transcript to transcript, meaning it's one university to one community college or vice versa. Whereas our data mart, shares all the transcript from the student into one record for that student. This is going, the student's attending this university and he attended your community college. And so it's only opening it up that way. And the reason for that, again, I say, is because we only have one view or one signed contract from our college, one signed contract from that university. We don't know if the other colleges and universities, community colleges that the student has attended has signed that same contract. So that's why it's very limited to one-to-one. And if we were to look at the student course summary, this is what that information breaks down to from what they're taking at their four-year institution. And this is where, again, it comes in handy to have your local equivalencies up to date, because this piece does not exist within the clearinghouse. Those equivalencies that we get from the UNC Data Mart don't exist within our clearinghouse. So that's where you want to make sure that you've got your Chemistry 101 is still the same chemistry that you have at the community college for that institution. So let's talk about the future. Hopefully I'm not boring you guys to death. But I think we've got some neat things on the horizon that's going to open up some great opportunities for our students that's going to hopefully make the process easier for us. So one of the things I wanted to share with you guys is we are working with Finish First NC. Many of our community colleges have implemented the process of Finish First, so we've all seen how it works. And so basically you have your transcripts, that your local transcripts, you have your programs of study, and then you mesh the two together to see if you've got any missing credentials or credentials for students. The process that we're looking for reverse transfer is very similar to that. One of the things that we're trying to bring in is going to be our UNC Data Mart transcripts. So we bring in the transcripts that we currently have within the data mart, so our UNC institutions. This is our practice run, so to speak, what we're trying to do to get it started, and then we'll start opening up to other opportunities. But the initial phase of this will be the data mart transcripts. We'll also bring in, as you know, if you process Finish First files, you know that you bring in 2 or 3 different spreadsheets in it, and then it does all the magic behind the scenes. And then Kai and Brian pop out and say, hey, here's your report. So when it goes in, you've got your data mart transcripts, you've got your local equivalencies. This information is pulled from your TCEQ file. Then you also have your AA and your AS program of study. One of the conversations that we're having now is to make this something for everyone to use. You know, it may be our program of study that resides at the system office. So that's our broadest view of the associate in arts or the associate in science, is the program of study that resides at the system office. Then each individual community college picks and chooses, here's the courses that we offer, so we're going to make this our program of study. We try to make a streamlined pathway, so on and so forth. So, thinking biggest grad first, we may begin that with our system office program of study. Then from there, drop all that into our Finish First tool. It's going to run the numbers, do its magic, and then produce a report for us for reverse transfer that lets us know, out of all these students, here's all the credentials that are earned for the Associate in Arts and Associate in Science. And you may be wondering, Patrick, is this really going to be beneficial? I say yes. Think about the hours you spend running your eval, your bevel, your burper process, trying to make sure to see, has this student earned a credential, and you're doing it manually, student by student, line by line, course by course. This will give us the opportunity to run it all at once, just a few quick clicks, and we have an output report that then says, yes, out of your 1,000 students, you've got 200 potential graduates. So this will be able to speed up our process. So hopefully we can get the ball rolling with this, and we're looking for some huge gains out of this. If not more credentials, at least we're going to give you guys some time back so that you can focus on some of your other jobs that you do at the college, because we all know that we all wear many hats. So what else do you have for us for the future, Patrick? Another thing that we're working with through our reverse transfer work is we're working with the Institute for Higher Education Policy. More so, we're working with Degrees When Due. And what are the things that we're learning from these folks? So for the rest of the year, we're in conversations with the folks from IHEP and Degrees When Due to hopefully help out how can we improve reverse transfer from North Carolina. So one of the things that they're able to give us is that national view of how everyone else is handling reverse transfer. It's strange because across the country, it's the same thing. You've got all these students and then a handful of credentials. So how do we pull together all the information that we know now about reverse transfer, and how do we move forward in the future? Here's a couple articles that they've provided for us that talks about some of the things that we're learning from reverse transfer. And the neat thing from these stories is that if you go out to read them, is that you'll see that, guess what? This was actually done through the credit when it's due grant, or it's all of the guys leading the way for reverse transfer are still leading today. These measured outcomes are coming out of those institutions. And so one of the things that it lets us hone in on or try to figure out how do we do this is North Carolina is transferring from an opt-in process where every student has to say, yes, I want into this process, to an opt-out process, which alleviates some of the stress and the burden that puts on our students, because as we all know, as we're turning on our system for the first time, we're logging into our student account for the first time, we're just clicking buttons. We're like, I just need to get past this. I just need to go in, I need to register for my first semester, I need to find out what books I need to buy. We're hopefully taking the stress out of that process by moving into an opt-out process. And from the article, it speaks about how Hawaii has actually implemented this opt-out process, and said that, meaning unless the students indicate that they do not want the degree, the associate's degree is conferred. And so many of us locally have turned on this process locally of earned credential means that you're going to be graduated, regardless of your graduation application, regardless of you stepping forward and saying you want to be graduated. Locally at our community colleges, we're starting to implement this process. So they did it at a statewide level and said that if that student earns the credential, it's going to be awarded. And so one of the data sets that came out of one of the articles, the first article actually talks about your retention rate after 2 years after receiving your reverse transfer credential. And so one of the questions that was looking to be answered out of reverse transfer is, are the students being retained? Are they moving forward towards their degree? And so even though these are small numbers, this was out of Hawaii and Minnesota, I believe. So even though it's small numbers as a system, it kind of gives you a view of it to say it's kind of representative of our group. So 243 students, once they whittled down all of the rubric for these students, once they removed any outliers so that every student's treated exactly the same, 67% of those students received reverse transfer credential, and 90% of the 67 were retained or continued on for their bachelor's degree. And so we were seeing some really good numbers just coming out of this report, because now we can start looking back and saying, now that we've done this for a few years, what do the numbers say? Now, do we have that information for North Carolina? Not yet, but hopefully we can get that information soon. So one of the things that I thought was interesting in the article, when it talked about the 243 students, I wanted to know, well, how did they get it down from thousands of students down to 243? And so they used this rubric to make sure that everyone was on the same playing field. And one of the things that they noticed was that you transferred from a 2-year to 4-year. Okay, easy enough. You've earned at least 12 or more credit hours, so you've holding your residency requirement back at your community college. You had at least a 2.0 GPA from your 2-year institution. You accumulated at least 60 cumulative college credits. And so they're running a report on the front end that says, check the student's information. If they have this information, pose the question, do you want to be in this process? Or you're going to be in this process unless you tell us otherwise. And then also made sure that they didn't already have an associate in arts degree or higher. So again, doesn't it sound familiar? It's very similar to what we do today, only they put this in their actual process, in their system. They have a system called the STAR system that they've been using since 2013 to identify those students once they've applied to the college and they're starting at the institution to be able to run their reports. So they see that they meet those criteria. They actually run the report, and much like many of our community colleges, they basically notify the student to say, hey, guess what? Based on the credentials or the credits that you have, you're eligible for an associate degree. We're going to graduate you out of this program unless you tell us. And so very few numbers actually come and tell the folks in Hawaii that they don't want their associate degree. The second article spoke about employment impact of students who received that reverse transfer credential. And here's just some of the words there. So what they were finding out of this when they were looking at the data is that those that did receive reverse transfer, 5 to 7%, were more likely to persist to complete the bachelor's degree compared to other students who didn't complete the associate degree prior to transfer onto the 4-year school. It also suggests that the partnerships between the community colleges and the universities are actually, we try to, it's when we look at, whose turf is it? Is it our community college? Is this a community college student or is this a bachelor's degree student? One of the things that, we always argue, students should have that associate degree before they transfer. It was opening up the question of, do they? If we have this framework in place that automatically allows them to earn that associate degree, do they have to have an associate degree before they transfer to be successful? So it's one of those things where it opens up that conversation. Those partnerships were showing that, maybe those students who transferred early were being more successful than our students who stuck out that associate degree and then went on to their bachelor's degree. One of the fears through reverse transfer is that students would then start stopping out of their bachelor's degree just because they earned that credential. They actually showed no evidence of that increasing those students stopping out. And long-term data actually still says that those degree completers will have a better outlook on the labor market whenever they go to graduate. So that's what brings us into one of the things that we're working with IHEP to hopefully get us to figure out this process and how it will look. So we also met with a couple of system offices to discuss how do they put this opt-out process in place. Texas has a common application that's used by everyone outside the state and within Texas. And through that, they actually added it in there. So it would be like us adding an additional question on the CFNC application. Whereas Hawaii runs this series of reports, very similar to our administrative graduation report, very similar to our finish first process, where we look at the data, we see that they've earned a credential, and then we notify the student, let them know that they've earned it. So how do we get there as North Carolina? It could be a combination of the both. One of the things that I have working with us for is the policy considerations. What are the things that we have to figure out policy-wise to implement an opt-out process, because it hits so many different areas. The same with our procedures. Do we implement a reporting piece that where we actually notify the student prior to them opting into the process? Or do we just let our application actually run all the work? And so that's what brings us into this future of reverse transfer. It's one of those things where if we can get this piece done, I think our numbers are going to go up for our students. We're going to have more credentials to award. We're going to have more students, especially in North Carolina, who's attending those UNC institutions. We're going to have more students who are earning that transfer advantage. And I would like to thank everyone for taking this nice walk with me and Gwen through reverse transfer. Gwen's been monitoring questions or keeping an eye on things to see if anyone had any comments or anything else to ask. Here's our contact information for myself. Well, just our names. I guess not so much our contact information, but our names, in case you were trying to figure out, what was that guy's name that spoke the entire time? So myself, Patrick Holyfield, and Miss Gwendolyn Whitaker from Forsyth Tech. So I'd like to open it up now for anyone who has any questions about reverse transfer, the past, the present, and the future.
Please do not be shy.
I will say that, that Gwen knows more than I do when it comes to records. So, I'm a bit when it comes to questions. I mean, Gwen, how would you handle it?
So Patrick, John did have a great question early on, but you did such an outstanding job with the presentation that you answered it, because he wanted to know, has the reverse transfer program been expanded to North Carolina private universities and colleges? Of course, you covered that. And then he and Lisa wanted the link to the snapshot that you were showing with the equivalencies. So I stuck that in there in the chat box for them. And those were the only two questions we had. I did revert back to John to make sure we did answer his question, and he said you did. So
excellent. Yeah, the transfer equivalencies is pretty cool when it comes to looking up courses and stuff like that. Before reverse transfer, I remember checking that out just to see what could I use these courses. Even if you're just doing admissions work and you're trying to work with an institution that that information might not already be built into TCEQ, that's always a good place to look for. It's a good question. It's a good question. One of the neat things, so think about our finished first work as we're trying to develop a more seamless process or a way to identify students with less work. Less work involved for our community college staff when it comes to processing those credentials and identifying those credentials. Now, if we take that a step further, this is a pie in the sky kind of where do we take this to do great things. So imagine as a student, you're actually able to log into a site or a website that says, you know what, how close am I to a credential? And so the student would enter in their demographic information, their name, their birthday, maybe the last four of their social or something like that as a unique identifier. And then they're able to actually research all of their records that we have for them through something like Finish First, a tool that's actually pulling data from the UNC Data Mart and then from the North Carolina Community College system. It's pulling from those reports our transcripts, and then it's actually going to lay it out to say, you know what, for an associate degree, you may have one more semester to go to graduate. And then guess what? Here's the institutions that are offering courses that you need in order to finish that credential. So pie in the sky, it wouldn't be that big of a jump to go from where we're at today with Finish First where we're looking to move with finish first on reverse transfer, and then taking that ultimate step of saying that, you know what, a student could actually do the work for themselves and view that credential to see how do I earn an associate degree in the quickest path possible.
Patrick, we do have 2 more questions in the chat. Lisa would like for you, if you would, to please explain what the transfer advantage distinction is again.
Perfect. So what the transfer advantage does, is it, in their system, so imagine, you know, in colleague, we have places where we can check a box and it means something, you know. So in Banner, for the UNC system, they have a checkbox that they check off whenever a student has earned an associate degree. What that does is it then removes the obligation for that student to have to go and take those general education requirements. So their 2 Englishes, their math, their sciences, their humanities, their fine arts, all of those courses, their histories. It says that, you know what, you've actually got an associate degree, so we don't have to make you take these additional courses towards your bachelor's degree. So it allows them to then skip those first 2 years of courses. So whenever that student transfers from our community college and goes on to 4-year school, you know, not all classes may transfer. They might not use all of their courses towards their degree of study, the program of study, but if they check that box, then yes, these courses all satisfy the requirements that you would have your first 2 years. And so that's why it's so important to try to work as hard as we can, you know, with our equivalencies and with our course substitution process to reward those credentials for the students, because we're using technically their transcript from that 4-year institution. The courses that are on there have already been vetted to say, we're using these in Charlotte, so why aren't we able to go ahead and use courses back at our institution?
The second question, Patrick, is can we add the North Carolina reverse table to the UNC Community College System dashboards?
So when you say the data, do you mean so that we could view in real time how many reverse transfer graduates we have by institution?
John, could you unmute and give clarification on your question so we make sure we're answering it?
And the only reason why I ask is not a no, but I can pose that question.
Well, I guess he's trying to break it out by credential on the dashboard. That's something we need to ask Bill and Ashley, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. To see when you look at, you know, completions on the dashboard for the system office, maybe there's a way to look at it as to how they receive these degrees.
I can ask on either.
Dr. Hickman, we could start sending the spreadsheet back to you to put on the dashboard.
Oh, no, you cannot.
From a processing side, that seemed fairly easy, just filling out a spreadsheet. I don't know what the problem is.
and that is exactly what John was asking, because he said no of awards by UNC system institution to North Carolina community colleges.
Okay, I can say, John, you need to stop asking questions. You trying to make them mess me up.
No, those are great questions, John. Keep them
John, those are great questions. I'm picking at you.
Keep them coming.
Keep them coming.
Now, if I had to throw out one other question, Pat, if I didn't know this piece, I would probably ask you how is it determined which school would receive the transcripts? Which community college would get the data from the data mart for reverse transfer?
So the data mart uses an algorithm to say who has the residency and then who has the most residency, or the last institution that they leave is so first you have residency and then you were the last institution that they were attending. And so that's who actually opens that transcript up to that institution. Now it's different. Good question. That's different when it comes to our folks at the clearinghouse. So at the clearinghouse, when you're looking at those students who are attending our independent institutions, I see we've got 30 seconds, so I'm gonna get it out. folks that are attending the private institutions, they're actually, it's the wild, wild west. If I can get to that student before Gwen can award that credential, I'm going to do it. And so that's where, if you open up that door, you want to make sure that you're checking it frequently for those additional transfers.
And Dr. Reynolds had more of a statement, and it was said that at the very least, it would be helpful to have a link on the community NCCCS site to the UNC data model.
Yep, absolutely. You get that, Monty?
I take it off mute. I'm sorry.
And I'm making a note of that too, folks, just so I can stay on top of Dr. Hickman. Perfect, perfect.
Great job.
Well, I hope this presentation was beneficial to everyone. I hope everyone got some good information out of it, and hopefully something that you can share with your friends. If you have any other questions or need any other assistance, you can always reach out to myself, Gwen, or Monty. Monty, like I said, is one of the representatives from the system office who's on there, as well as myself. You can email us, give us a phone call, especially Dr. He loves phone calls. So you can contact us, reach out to us that way, and we'll be able to help you guys out. I appreciate everyone attending our session today, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of the sessions at the Performance Partnership.
Thank you, too. Wonderful job.
And Patrick, let it keep running for another 15 seconds.
Will do.
Great job, Patrick.
Hey, good job, guys. Thank you for the support.
Yeah.
Great information.
I saw the head nods.
You saw that, right? Right.
I did. I
Right.
guess I hit stop broadcast and let everyone else to stop.
Yeah. Even was able to throw in a